Thank you.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to The Spiritual Activist. I could not be more thrilled. I've got an extraordinary group of people here with me today. You're going to notice some fresh faces. We've got Amy Alcini with us from Recycling Happiness. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
You're very welcome. It's great to have you. David Pagan from Kick-Ass Dad. Welcome, David.
This guy. Thank you.
Kelly Marceau from kellymarceau.com. Welcome, Kelly.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a co-host. And then we've got the extraordinary, who's our featured guest today, the extraordinary Jay Forte from the Greatness Zone. Welcome, Jay. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. What else am I going to say, right?
Yeah, I don't see what else you could say. One of the things that kind of prompted this conversation today was how do we begin to step into our greatness? We have a world that is in turmoil for many different reasons. We've got health crisis going on. We've got financial crisis. We have so many things that are pushing us towards showing up big in the world in order that we can take action and start to change the way the game is played. And that's really what I'm passionate about. And I think that you, Jay, bring such an extraordinary quality from your work. Can you kind of walk us through what was the inspiration for your work and how it's been manifesting for you today?
Yeah, I'd like to. The Greatness Zone came out of two different things. One is my own life that was misaligned for most of it. Wrong job, wrong marriage, wrong way of doing life, because I went and listened to everybody else about how I should do it instead of doing what I truly trusted in myself, trusting my own spiritual path instead of the path that everybody else creates for you. And I'm just an epic, or I was, significant at listening to everybody else more than myself, or trusting others more than myself. And I know one of the things that we'll get to in the course of today's discussion is, when you trust your own spiritual connection, it doesn't lead you astray. And what you need to do is to be tuned into what matters to you in a more significant way. So I was a lot of the reason for the work of the Greatness Zone. The other part came that I was a consultant in human capital management. I worked with companies helping people put the right job, brave people in the right jobs. And what we found was that most people didn't know themselves well enough to know what job they fit in. And in today's workplace, not every job fits you. You're not hiding behind machines anymore. You're face-to-face or phone-to-phone with customers. And if you're not good at it or you don't like it, they know it. So a changed world created a new look on how do we put people in the right jobs, and core to that is understanding your intrinsic abilities, your own passions, and your sense of purpose. So, this was the serendipitous moment where some of the work I was doing in the workplace and my own quest to find out where I belonged in life came together, and it shows up in the work that now has the title of The Greatness Zone.
That's outstanding. So could you give us real quick, before we jump into kind of a panel discussion about how we all seek greatness, tell us a little bit about what is the definition of greatness from the Greatness Zone perspective?
Yeah, it's that each of us are intrinsically or born intrinsically awesome, that there is a unique combination of abilities, interests, and passions that make us truly different and distinct. And the Greatness Zone is that place where we get to be it, and it really is evident in my favorite quote, and Mike, you've heard this one a lot. It's Frederick Buechner says this. He says, your vocation or your purpose in life is where your greatest joy meets the world's greatest need. And that's really another way of saying the Greatness Zone is you're good at it, the world needs you, you put the two together, you get to show up big to the things that you do. Mm. And though there's a practical side about choosing the right job and the right partner and the right way of living so that you feel that your life has manifested in a big way, but there's still a really significant spiritual message in that about identifying what your gifts are and showing up big to your world using your gifts.
That's awesome. So real quick, I want to shoot it over to Kelly real quick. Kelly, you had a serendipitous moment where you kind of, I don't even think you realized it, but it happened so fast for you where you just stepped into your greatness by writing this article that just hit so many people on such a foundation. What was that like for you when you just kind of followed through on what you were good at and all of a sudden it paid off?
It was overwhelming and amazing. Yeah, I had 450,000 people trafficking my website in 3 days from all over the globe, and it was astonishing. When it first happened, it was kind of just like, oh my God, is this real? And I didn't do it trying to be great. I actually just was really, really, really honest. And for some reason, it was like in my moment of just being really honest with myself, the rest of the world heard me, and they were like hearing parts of them that were honest. So it was incredible. But maintaining that, like that's a whole nother thing. Stepping into greatness is one thing. Maintaining it is another thing.
That's a great point. Amy, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's great. I mean, Jay and I were talking about that earlier, but Kelly, a lot about even what John Wooden talked about his whole life is he made a point of not using the word winning or win, and he was one of the most successful coaches in American history. And so he was really, if he's not talking about winning, what is he talking about if he's that successful of a coach? Well, he's talking about the process, and he's talking about taking care of each detail in the process. And to me, it sounds like that's exactly what you were doing as it relates to being honest and being open. You were as specific and detailed as you could be about what was really the issue or for you. And because of that, you had this great outcome, which in the world we call winning. But in our own hearts, we know that we won before we won, because we know that that process was so rich, and so we got all the juices out of that process. So we know what that's going to end up being. So I'm really excited for you, and I want to say congratulations, because I think that's fantastic.
That's such a great That's such a great point, Amy, that you bring up about that process, because so oftentimes when we think about winning or we think about the end result, we just seem to never get there because we're trying so hard to get that result instead of focusing on the process. And I think that's what Jay has done such an extraordinary job of creating. The Greatness Zone is not just about these three circles or these three, just knowing what you're passionate about, what you're talented at. It's about the process to discovering that. David, you've been through Jay's course. What do you think is so powerful about the process Jay has created?
That he makes me cry almost every time.
That's not on purpose, David.
I don't believe you, Jay. No, it's there's something about the process, and to be quite honest, I mean, when we speak about the Greatness Zone, it's kind of the tip of the iceberg, really, because it lends itself to so many other different aspects. Not just in life coaching, but so many different times in your lives and so many different avenues you can take it in, and it really makes you show up big in every moment. For me, I mean, what I love about it is that it makes it, no one tells you what you're great at. No one tells you, hey, I saw your artwork. You're a fantastic artist, and I noticed you really like tomatoes. You should draw tomatoes for a living. Like that's not how it goes down. Jay, there were some things where, even some questions that I had asked Jay, and I was like, hey, here's what I'm struggling with, right? Let's use this as an example as a part of the course, right? I always volunteer myself. And what I thought the problem was had absolutely nothing to do with me reaching my greatness in that particular moment. And there's something about the process that just makes you come to it on your own, and when you get there, like, it's not the door that you think that you were going to open. It's not the way it looked like when you thought you were going to go through it, but it feels absolutely amazing when you're there.
That's just a great point. So, Jay, as the creator and author of the Greatness Zone, would you mind sharing what's your Greatness Zone? What's your vision for a beautiful life?
My Greatness Zone is being in a place that allows me to write and share perspectives that could change the world if I could get them out there. So the place that I need to be. So my greatest joy is writing about choosing to show up big when you previously chose to show up small. And even if you didn't intend to show up small, you were doing it. If you didn't choose to show up big, you are accidentally or inadvertently choosing to show up small. So my Greatness Zone is helping people realize that with a little bit of direction, that anybody can be connected to that spot. That's, call it your birthright, call it your intrinsic core ability, that every part of each one of us, that we each have the ability of showing up significantly, and it's my significant role, my Greatness Zone is getting out to the world, sharing how to do that.
That's awesome. One of the things that I find so fascinating about our society is that we do live in a society of mediocrity, but we worship greatness, but we don't think we can attain greatness, and that's what like drives me nuts. Because I'll go to the store and I'll see these tabloids and just these people who yesterday they were being worshipped by the masses, today they're trying to be ripped down from their pedestal. I'll lay this question out to the panel. Why do we worship as a society greatness and then try to rip it to the ground?
I'll weigh in on that one. I think we have a contorted view of what greatness is. And I think greatness is affluence and fame is what societally I think that's what we think it is. And greatness, from my perspective, greatness is being authentic, much like what Kelly was talking about. Her stepping into her greatness wasn't an intentional move to change the world. It was, how do I show up as my authentic self, my best, most creative, and most remarkable self? That's what greatness is. And the outcome of it, the impact of it, isn't necessarily that you're rich or you're famous or that the tabloids pick you up or say anything about you. It's that, did you achieve the things that you were capable of doing and bringing to the world? That's greatness. And until we change the definition, we will always think that greatness is about fame and fortune and affluence and wealth. And until that is, then we won't see that the true message of what greatness is about is a spiritual adventure rather than a financial process.
Yeah, it almost sounds like greatness, the way that we perceive it in our culture, is a destination and not a journey.
Yeah.
And so when we see somebody glorified in greatness, I think that people have a tendency to project all sorts of things onto those people, and when those people slip or something happens, all of a sudden that ideal is lost, even though it's not really, but our idea of it is lost. And so, we go, it's just like love and hate. You can be massively in love with someone and the next minute hate their guts. We live in a world of extremes. And so, and greatness is one of those things that I think on many levels, when people fantasize about it, it's not really what it looks like in action. It's not really what it looks like in reality. It's some form of fantasy, and we live in a world that's based on a lot of fantasy and not a lot of reality.
Well, I think that's
Mike?
why.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I think that's why people refer to it as making it, right? Like, oh, look at that person. He made it. As in, that was a destination. He's done now. He or she is done now. And then from that point, we hold them to this unrealistic expectation of, because we do worship these celebrities or financial moguls, whatever it is, we worship them, so we make them divine immediately.
Yes.
And people worship that, and then they tear them down because they worship it because they don't believe that they are divine. Right? The majority of the world doesn't believe that they have any divinity in them. They believe that they're less than. So that's why they worship these people. And then at some point, and it usually happens when they make a mistake in their journey, whoever this celebrity is or whoever it is that we're worshiping, a political leader or whatever, they make a mistake, and then we go, oh, they're not divine. They're just like me. And so they have to pull them down to their level. Otherwise, then, they don't feel like it's deserved, whatever it is, and it turns into a very, catabolic energy, as Jay likes to point out. And it's this vicious cycle of appointing gods and then tearing them down. And we don't really get anywhere.
Listening to you guys is it's a very interesting conversation and very important, I think. I think a lot of what you guys are saying, for me, feels like intrinsic and extrinsic values. So it's what are we valuing? Anytime we're talking about a celebrity or someone that we see on a magazine or somewhere else, that is not, to me, an internal value, right? So I feel like that's extrinsic. So you're automatically, if I'm looking to something outside of myself to determine success, automatically I need to have a little bit of a red flag around that. Because luckily, I have a personal example. I've been playing tennis for 36 years, and there's a certain amount of championships I've won. Now, I could say that I haven't won enough, or I could say I've won enough. So, and there could be a whole committee out there that's weighing in and saying, well, you haven't won enough to be the best. But the thing is when inside I feel like I don't need to win another championship, to me, that's success. To me, so it's very internal. I've really tried to focus it way more internally. It's very hard in our society, especially with the social media and everything going on, and everybody weighing in on what you're doing. I mean,
Right.
everyone has something to say about it. But at the end of the day, when you go to bed, you know what I mean? It's your feeling. Your feeling is what's determining your success.
Is Amy breaking up to any other?
And I just feel like that.
Yeah. Sorry, Amy, you were cutting out.
Oh, no, just that there's always going to be someone who has a different opinion about, you know, I mean, look at the greatest, you know, the greatest athletes in the world or the greatest business people in the world. I mean, even like the Elon Musks and the, you know, Michael Jordans and all these people, there are many, many critics. You can go online and find, you know, I mean, Michael Jordan even did a parody of that, and my favorite commercial that he did, he actually opens a scene talking about all of his failures. It opens a scene talking about how many times his team trusted him to take the game-winning shot, and he missed. So how are you defining greatness? And he makes a parody of it himself so that we can see that this is Michael Jordan. And this is what he did, and this is how many times he failed, or how many people think that he's not successful. You know what I mean? So I feel like when we turn it inward, the gauge gets right on track for me. Like, the gauge gets way more on track than when I'm looking extrinsically at what success is.
Right. It's this idea of, instead of measuring ourselves against people who have been to the mountaintop, we should be focused inward. And this kind of brings me back to this whole point about spirituality and how spirituality can kind of, because you were talking a lot about that, Jay, about listening to your inner spirituality, and this can sound really, really woo-woo to a lot of people. They're going, you know, what spiritual? I just don't get it. And so, what are your guys' thoughts on how, you know, this idea of spirituality has kind of been taken away from people and made to sound really fluffy when, you know, in our conversation, how it relates to greatness?
Oh, I have a lot to say about this, but Jay, go ahead. I want to hear what you have to say first.
I like to think that that, like many things, just because we defined it in a particular way doesn't mean that's what it is. And I think we have the obligation of defining some things in our own head. So spirituality, growing up as a Catholic kid, meant you went to church. That's what spirituality was. It's synonymous with religion. And I think the woo-woo part of it is that many people think that spirituality is a connection, you know, to, or they're synonymous with God. And I think from a greatness perspective, spirituality and greatness to me are pretty similar words. That your own sense of spirituality comes from your own sense of identity, and the reminder that intrinsic to you is greatness and some component of divinity that's in there, and your spirituality is your road or your journey to discover that in you and then bring it forward. However that looks, some people may do it in a structured religion. Others may do it in the way that they live. Some vegans call their process of living the way that they do spiritual. But to me, the spiritual part of it is the intentional road that you create to realize all of that, what you're capable of being and doing, and showing up to life in that way.
That's powerful. Kelly, what were your thoughts?
I mean, I just want to say that was really beautiful, because one of the things that Jay did was he really kept it about, you know, himself. And I feel like my problem with spirituality is that, you know, the nature of reality is mysterious to all of us, and a lot of spiritual types want to really understand the ultimate sense of reality, right? Well, we don't live in ultimate reality, and yes, ultimate reality, you know, may have an impact on us. It's kind of like, you know, the destination, like, where are we going? What's after this? What's happening? And I find it really hard sometimes, because when I'm talking about real life things or things that are going on or simple truths like what Jay's talking about, what Jay just talked about is a very simple truth. But a spiritualist might come in and like have this whole thing about like, oh, there is no self, or there is no this, or there, you know, it's all an illusion. And, you know, like that stuff doesn't help. And so I think that it's really hard in this world, and I mean, this is, I think, that the reason that, you know, church and state got separated, because on some level, like, we have to be able to deal with reality as it exists in the relative world and some ultimate sense of something greater, right? We have the individual, and then we have the collective. We have this greater thing. But the thing is that I think that we need to step away from constantly debating, like, what is truth? What is this? What is that? And just really, like, what Amy was saying and what Jay is saying, just really owning what is yours. What is your truth? Like, what do you feel? Like, what do you want for yourself? What is your idea of greatness? And sticking with that rather than constantly looking outside of ourselves for whatever it is that we're, bumping up against.
That's such a great point. It reminds me of the philosophers who, push back endless bottles of cognac in arguments about ultimate reality while children suffer and die around them, right? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, like, I posted something on Facebook the other day about how truth is, one of the most difficult languages to speak. And all these spiritual people jumped on it, and they were like, it's if you put the word my in front of truth, then it's an illusion. It doesn't exist. And I'm just thinking to myself, what reality do you live in? Like, it's just, and I feel like it's just this constant debate. It's this constant thing of like, who's right, who's wrong, and it's like, who cares? Who cares? So,
right.
Anyways.
Right. No, that's such a great point, because it's like, and that's the thing. It's not about the truth. It's about your truth. And so greatness to me, Jay, is that ability to step into your truth with sincerity, honesty, and really discover your talents and passions, then pushing those forward to step into that greatness. And I think that, and that's such a great point that you bring up, Kelly, because yes, we could debate the true nature of reality all day long, but at the end of the day, what are we taking action on? And that's why I find the idea of activism to be so powerful. It's like we all have thoughts, we all can speak our minds, but who's really out there taking action based on those things? Who's creating that congruency? And I think that's part of greatness. What are your thoughts on that, David?
I kind of feel the same way Kelly does. The whole word spiritual, I've kind of always had a problem with, and it's one of the reasons why I steered clear of that kind of stuff, because I didn't agree with, half the time a topic would come up, like I'd be just discussing a very human emotion called happiness. Like, I wasn't happy in this relationship, or I wasn't, really treated right. And so that's why I left, and I hope one day I can find someone that I can truly be happy with. And the reply, comes back, it's like, well, really happiness is within yourself, and no one else can control your happiness, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, are you seriously telling me you didn't hear a word I just said? Like, you really believe that that I'm searching for my happiness in somebody else? Even when they know you, they still speak like above your head, and it's almost it's condescending is what it is. It's condescending to the human form, to human nature, to humanity as a whole, to act like these things don't actually exist, right? I had a conversation with one of our former panelists, Rahul. I was like, to say that you don't need anything else other than inside yourself to accomplish your happiness or your goals or to fulfill your purpose in life is like saying something that was perfectly created or designed, regardless of where you think creation came from, or I guess you can't call it creation, where this earth came from, life came from. That's to say, like a tree, doesn't need anything other than what's inside of itself to grow up and to grow and flourish and to become beautiful and to do everything it was intended to do, which is provide oxygen, provide shade, help with the water system, all these things. That's not true. In fact, it's perfectly designed, but it needs sunlight, it needs water, it needs nutrition, it needs all of these things. So you can't say that all any being needs is what's inside of itself in order to to flourish. To me, that's a cop-out, so that no one has to do anything. So you can just sit back and put your turban on, or jump on your magic carpet, whatever it is that you feel like doing, right? And not do anything. I think it absolves people of responsibility.
Well,
Amy, what are your thoughts on that? Oh, so go ahead. No, you're good. You're good.
Just like something you said that's so interesting is it's like there's this whole movement in spirituality to get away from the individual. The individual really isn't real, and yet there's so much that's put on us as individuals for our own happiness and what we seek. And the reality is that we are individuals, and we live in a world of individuals with other people, and we do need other people. Like if I was in this world by myself, like it wouldn't be as cool. You know, like I do, like I need my parents. Like I love my friends, and I'm a better human being because of it. And I just think that we have to get away from this whole, I don't know, I just feel like there's all this definition of how we need to be, and it just becomes so rigid. And, you know, it's like, it doesn't need to be so rigid. So we need other people, like, so, you know, yeah, I don't know. It's just really interesting. I really like what David said. I'm sorry, Amy. Like, I want to hear what you guys have to say, too.
No, I really want to hear what Amy has to say, because Amy, like, I mean, you deal not only in the real world, but, like, at this point, you know, in government, and it doesn't get any more separate between church and state there. So how do you feel about it?
Well, I think this conversation is great. One of the quotes that I really love, and I think we probably all appreciate this, is that we are spiritual beings having a human experience.
Yep.
Yes.
So right there, we can say that we're all spiritual, right? So it's like saying we're all humans, but actually it's even more to the point to say that we're all spiritual, but we're living here. So humanity maybe is our second thing, but spirituality is our common thread. So it's almost like redundant to call ourselves spiritual.
Yeah.
Okay, so that maybe that's some of the confusion.
I'm glad we cleared that up.
Yeah, right?
I don't know, but it seems like it, because it's like we're trying to define something we already are, right? So maybe that therein lies the confusion, possibly. Secondly, you know, in terms of what you're saying, Kelly, is that as it relates to politics too, especially, this came up a lot. So there's one thing about kind of calling everything illusion, and then there's something about like, well, pouring pink paint over something and then calling fire when there's a fire. So we can say, you know, we can just pour pink paint over something and say, you know, it doesn't matter, or we can kind of cover it up. But the other thing is that we can call out things that are really a problem. And that's what I was involved in for 9 months. Is really, it's not about demonizing individuals, it's about changing a system that individuals have to work in. So if something is broken and you put an individual in the situation, an individual is not going to be able to work in a broken system. Yeah. It's like a dysfunctional family. You put a third-party child into a dysfunctional family, well, more than likely the child will pick up on some of those dysfunctional behaviors. So it's about changing things at the root, at the cause, because then the effects are what we do at the cause. So if we're changing the things at the very root, then what we get is going to be different. And maybe that is also, I think of things like that as it relates to illusion, because illusion is another slippery slope for me, hearing people use it. Marianne has been very helpful in helping me understand what illusion is. Like, we all have to live together. She used the example, like, we're all at a seminar and something, God forbid, happens and this person falls on the floor and they can't breathe. We're not going to all sit there and think that they're going to get better by themselves. The reality of the situation is we are going to get up, we are going to act. Someone's going to call 911, someone else is going to do something else. We're going to clear out the room, we're going to ask for doctors. Right. So this is what is, although we can call this an illusion, there are real things that we get called upon to do. And so to me that very clears things up about what's the illusion and what is real. But even to what David said too, like, you know, we want to be engaged with people. I mean, that's the whole idea of being alive in humanity is our interaction with other people. So it's very important that we kind of work on this. This might be our whole thing, is to be able to develop this kind of relationship with other people. That's the most fulfilling thing for us to do. That might be our whole challenge. To, you know, not about nothing, about people. About everything is about people, and every relationship we have is important. So, you know, that's kind of how I think of things sometimes, and I think sometimes that makes a lot of sense to me.
I think you really nailed that on the head there. I mean, that was clarifying for me, because it's like we're all sitting here trying to define ultimate reality or what is illusion, yet we're here in front of each other in a human form, in a human experience, I doubt, it doesn't seem very logical that we should be debating where we came from when we're here now. Like, that's frustrating to me.
It is frustrating.
Exactly.
Mike, can I add something, Mike?
Please.
So one of the things we talk about that just seemed an epiphany for me as we were doing some of this work in the Greatness Zone was when we came up with what we call a rhodium rule. And so rhodium is most precious metal. So there's the golden rule, there's the platinum rule, and so we think there's something that there's more important. And to me, I think it speaks to just what Amy and Kelly were talking about. And the way that I've defined it is the golden rule is know yourself. In other words, stay connected to your own spiritual truth about what's true for you, and identifying your own intrinsic greatness. What is it that you got? So that's cool that you know it, but that's not enough. So spiritual activist, that's the first two parts here. So know yourself, that's a spiritual part. Activist is the second part, which says be yourself. Whatever it takes, look through your world, find the places you should show up as the biggest and best, and most authentic you. So know yourself, be yourself. The third part, which I think brings to Kelly's point and to Amy's point, is help other people be themselves. In other words, when you know what your spiritual adventure was like, for you to discover yourself is your spiritual work, your ability to look in, to understand what it is that's different and unique about you that you should bring out, then that moved you from know yourself to be yourself. They didn't say stop there, know yourself, good, now you got it done. It's know yourself and then find applications so that you can do it. And when you did that, you could show up to today's world in a more significant way. And that's what I think the spiritual challenge is. Knowing yourself isn't enough. Knowing yourself and being yourself
I like that.
is the goal. But if we stop there, then it's too self-centered. So what's the next step? The next step is help everybody else do the same thing. What if we had the ability and the commitment and the awareness that the goal in life is to help everybody else self-discover? Discovery.
Beautiful.
And if you could do that, imagine the things that now currently occupy all of our thinking are, you know, as Amy, Mike, and we've talked about this before, are 180 degrees away from where we should be. And if we could undo the me versus you or the celebrity, and this is what greatness means, too, that the concept of greatness is helping you discover your ability to show up big, to deliver to your world the thing that you do best. And if you could do that, imagine how you would change the world. So know yourself as spiritual, be yourself as practical, help everybody else is transformational. And that's, and in my head, that's why I think we call it the rhodium rule. So.
That's awesome.
I didn't catch any of that, Jay. Can you say all of that again?
Yeah, right. No.
Well, I think, and that totally speaks to that point. I mean, we have this opportunity in our world, and I mean, I went to public school, okay? I'm used to when you go to school, you do everything you can to put your arms up and to defend yourself, and it's either fight or flight, right? You either, create a space for yourself and show up big, or you run. And I did both, and probably both were good for what I needed then. But we live in this world, and that's where, you walk outside every day and you say anything about being spiritual, you say anything about being an activist, and you're met with, like, massive dissent, and you're met with massive, like, people just going, what are you talking about? And I think that this conversation is really powerful because it brings this idea that it's not about me proving me to you. It's about being me and then stepping up into the world and having the courage to do that and then letting other people do the same thing, not tearing somebody else down because they see it differently than me. And I think that's where we can really start to make some changes in our society, is saying, you know what, do your thing, do you. Stop worrying about me, and I'll do the same for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the most significant part of thinking like that is that it's both self and world. And that, it's like Amy was talking about, if we're truly to manifest our greatness, and that isn't keeping it to yourself, that's doing something with it. That if we're to do that, then we have to be, first of all, self-aware or conscious enough or mindful enough, and not mindless the way most people are. And the mindlessness happens not because we intend to, it's because we don't intend to. We are not intentional about the things that we do. And that if we understood that the beginning of this entire process comes with the awareness that we should be aware in the moment, that all the information to self-discover would show up in that moment, the very next moment would set us up to have a discussion in a bigger way. But it's a lot of work to fight back with things that Western culture, for the most part, hasn't considered valuable. You know, how many people do, and I'm pleased that more and more people are doing this, but talk to our parents' generation, or even some, so I'm a boomer, so in my generation, that how many people meditate without it being a new thing that they just stepped into as some method of connecting with their moment. And had there not been an Eckhart Tolle or a John Kabat-Zinn or a Sylvia Boorstein or Deepak Chopra, we wouldn't be having these conversations about showing up to the moment. So there have been some trailblazers who have said, it is a spiritual world. And the gifts that you have, the only access to it is through a spiritual route. And you can call the spiritual part of that the adventure, the road, the investigation, whatever you want to call it. That's your way of discovering something that is your ticket to the game of life. And if you knew the answer to that, or if you got your ticket to the game of life, you would then show up. And if you showed up, you would turn things around. And if you turn things around, you would give other people the courage and the permission to do it too. That, I think, is what our spiritual message is about. Don't be afraid to be you. Be bold enough to be you, because if you do, you give everybody else the courage to say it's right and I should do it. And if it could affect this kind of change, then imagine the rest of the change if we all worked to something like that. And I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, but please stay.
So good. So good.
Please stay on your soapbox, because, my God, Jay, I mean, that's the beauty right there. It's that internal investigation. It's taking stock of who you are and your behaviors and starting to think from a being perspective, like, who am I being? Not what am I doing, where am I going, who am I being, and then, you know, taking those actions. What Amy, you just got off the campaign trail with Marianne Williamson. She has got this very spiritual message. She, you know, A Course in Miracles is what she uses as her philosophy, and she's created this entire identity around that, or at least not identity, but message around that. But she couldn't really share that on the campaign trail as much because people see this spiritual thing as woo-woo. What are your? I mean, how did she reconcile that?
So the way she reconciled that and the way she communicated to us is that her spiritual process and her spiritual foundation is that. It's a foundation. So it's like she talks about a lot like our skeletal musculature and our attitudinal musculature. Okay, so every one of us, we get up somehow during the day, we do some kind of exercise, right? Because we want to be able to move. So we, you know, go to the gym or we run. So we're exercising our muscles physically, okay? So there's no point at which we can say, oh, we have the perfect body and tomorrow we're not going to do anything, because it doesn't work like that. If we have the most perfect ideal image, body image right now about what we think, tomorrow we can't really take the day off. We can't go 2 or 3 weeks without cultivating that, keeping that level. So it's like the same thing. She makes the same analogy with attitudinal muscles. So it's like Jay said, I think this conversation, it's come up before, and I've heard you say it too, Mike. If we're not working on it, it's going down, right? So it's not like we can just be neutral. We can't just say, oh, today I'm not going to work on, you know, having some stillness, putting things in my mind that are going to produce what I want to happen. I mean, what she's told me is that she gets up in the morning before phones, coffee, tea, whatever, and she takes this time to set her intention of how she wants to interpret the world today. So if she goes out and just opens a paper and turns on a TV, she's going to take in the entire emotional gestalt of the world, okay? Without her plan, right? Without her connection. So now, rewind, she wakes up, she does her connection, and then she takes in the world so that she can transform the world. And that's what I really liked what Jay said. The third part of the rhodium rule is there is a pretty good formula of how to transform things, but it definitely has to run through the vessel of you.
Yeah.
So to be transformative, it has to run through the vessel of you, as does a miracle, because miracles only happen through you. There is no other place that miracles can happen. And this is the stuff we learn, and then all this stuff makes sense. You know, like when you're riffing on your stuff, Mike, on Jay's talking about the rhodium rule, Dave is talking about, you know, all this stuff is like, oh, I see. I see. We all are explaining it in our own way, but it all comes together the same way. To hone our container, to make our container clear and effortless, so that when the Spirit is moving through us, it's almost like frictionless.
Mike, I got to add something here. So it's, to me, Amy, I love the way you said that, because me stepping into my greatness might be the miracle that you need.
Right.
And had I not done this,
Right.
then what you need may not be available. Because part of the way it all works is that if each of us step boldly into what it is that we do, there is opportunity after opportunity everywhere. Possibilities. Mike, that's the reason why we named the course Life Possibilities. The possibilities are endless on how we show up making an epic difference. But if we don't own that, if we don't choose to show up that way, then many of these things that I just say the universe is tapping their foot, waiting for, okay, you got to figure you out and go show up here, because you know you're the one who's supposed to make this change.
Yes.
And it's not about everything. I can't even remember who it was that said, you know, your job isn't to change the world. You just change the part of the world that you touch. So you could make an epic change in the life of someone whose purpose is then now to show up big where they weren't going to show up big before. And in that moment, the impact that you had was not yours, but the collective impact of you affecting somebody else, And that happens only if you choose to play. You know, there's a great wing. In fact, I think, Amy, you or Kelly said it before. You know, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky's quote.
Yeah.
Right. So if you are not invested in showing up by understanding that you have to do some spiritual work to figure out how to show up, then everybody around you misses out. And not to throw any more weight on all of us, you know, we got pressure already, right? So how do I not disappoint the people around me by not doing something they didn't even know I was supposed to do? Sorry, that's like over the edge. But the thinking is, if there is a moral responsibility, and maybe it's my own doing, but if there's a responsibility for me to bring to the world what it is that I do best because the world needs it, then to me it makes great sense. And I don't know if it's right or wrong, but I don't care if it's right or wrong. Is it productive or unproductive? And I think it's productive for us to think that the world is truly waiting for us to show up and do something with what it is that they gave us. And the gave us came through our DNA and through our unique abilities that show that we're good at some things and we love some things. Or a friend of mine says we rock at some things, we stink at some things. So in that case, don't do the things you stink at. Do the things you rock at, because the world you touch that way will be influenced in a significant way.
That's powerful. Yeah.
You're really beautiful. I love that.
Yeah,
that kind of goes along. That reminds me of two things, really. Jim Carrey's speech that he just gave, that's kind of gone viral, where he says you can lose. I believe it was you can lose at life at doing what you don't love or what you don't want to do. You might as well do what you love to do, and you bring so much more. I mean, because at that point the possibilities are endless, and that kind of goes along with what Kelly's post was about that caused so much controversy, where she says, the most difficult language to speak is truth, and she was referring to your own individual truth, right? It's like, for me, it paints a picture of, okay, you're on an airplane and someone, I don't know, passes out, whatever it is, and people ask, is there a doctor on the plane? And you are a doctor and you just don't say anything, right? Or you're a nurse and you don't say anything, you don't do anything. Well, in essence, you lied to yourself because of what you could do. You lied to everyone else around you. You didn't speak your truth, right? At least in a general sense, as far as when it comes to your responsibility to be true to you.
I like that example, David. That's a good example.
And so, thank you, Amy. That means a lot coming from you. So on a smaller scale, if you're with a group of friends and you guys all want to go get some ice cream or something like that after a hike or whatever it is, and everyone there loves vanilla ice cream. You all go, but you don't. You like chocolate ice cream, and you don't speak up. One, you own the fact that you didn't say something that possibly could have, made your time there greater, right? You could have really shown up and been happy for the rest of your friends because you got what you actually wanted, right? And you also take away from and lie to, you take away the opportunity for your friends to get to know who you really are, and therefore then you guys can now be your greatest selves as a unit, kind of speaking to what you were saying before, Jay, right? Allowing to affect the other people, because who knows, that now gives them the opportunity to accommodate you, to show their greatness, to show their love,
Try chocolate ice cream.
Try chocolate ice cream, who knows, maybe they never had that stuff, I don't know, I would hope not. It's the best. But that kind of speaks to what she was saying there. Sometimes the hardest language to speak is your truth, and you're doing yourself a disservice, and really all those around you a disservice by not doing that, because you don't, it's like keeping a masterpiece, covered up with a canvas.
Well, and you guys,
we shortchange the world, is what you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys both hit on this idea earlier about how so oftentimes spiritual people say, well, you should just be happy within yourself. As long as you're happy within yourself, then nothing else can affect you. And that, okay, but then if I'm in this bliss state, right? I meditate all day. I'm in this pure state of bliss, connection with the divine. It's all there. And then there's people suffering in the world who could benefit from my greatness. Think if the Dalai Lama didn't talk. Think if the Dalai Lama didn't share his truth, right? Think if all these incredible leaders throughout history didn't speak up when things were going wrong, but they were perfectly happy within their own hearts, right? What are we missing? And that's where I feel like, this message of spiritual activism is so necessary to the world, is because it's not enough, right? Being happy within yourself is not enough to elevate the planet, and we have, and if you are in that knowledge, if you have that, sacred knowledge or that understanding of greatness or that passion to do something in the world, and you're not speaking up and you're just sitting in meditation, and don't get me wrong, I face this every single day, speaking my truth when I'm in positions where most people wouldn't want to hear my truth, and in addition to that, it just isn't, appropriate in the workplace or in this place or that place, and those are the exact places where it's needed most. Is what I'm finding.
Yeah, I think the challenge to show up big and authentic is intimidating for a lot of people, personally as well as the people around them. When somebody is truly in their zone doing their thing, most of the world points and laughs or points and comments, instead of applauding, saying, how good of you to figure out that that's for you. And instead, we then see that the response that we get says, oh, don't do this. And then we back off on it. And so, all of this focus that, Mike knows that one of the people that you had interviewed before, Shafali Sabari, her great book, The Conscious Parent, where she talks about what is it that we send out to other people if we can, in fact, be authentic ourselves? Hers is particular. What message we send to our kids that anytime it doesn't work out our way, we should be able to find within ourselves some strength in order to realize that life sends you what life sends you, and you are capable and strong enough and able to handle what's there. And I think that message, though, is mostly that. How do we stop using everybody else's guidance as our own guidance, but understand that we in fact have to show up in that world. So I do have to be a little bit sensitive to other people. So it's not that I always just get to do my thing, but I get to do my thing as it advances and improves the world around us. That doesn't mean there won't be conflict, but it means that I approach it with a high level of anabolic energy, saying I do this graciously and gratefully, because I think there's something here that would raise the bar for all of us, rather than this is all about me. So if I'm making it all about me, I don't know that it's coming from a spiritual place. I think it's coming from an ego place. And how do we know that difference? Well, we're going to have to struggle every now and then and do something that's in ego instead of spiritual, because we just didn't know the difference, because no one gave us the guidebook or the rule book on what one looks like and what the other one doesn't look like, or what it looks like. So I think it's about having the courage in order to step into doing these things. So, Mike, you know from the program, we just call it the 4 C's, right? The clearer you are, meaning the more spiritual you are and the more you tune into yourself, the clearer you are, it allows you to make better choices. The better choices you make, the more confident you feel. And the more confident you feel, the more courageously you live because you know it's right for you. And that right for you doesn't mean it's not, it means it's at the expense of other people. It's right for you as it supports other people. And now I'm back to what I think we put together with the whole Rhodium rule, that know yourself, be yourself, don't stop there, help everybody else be themselves. It's not just you here. You are the manifestation of what it is that's amazing about you, but so are they. And that namaste mindset, may the divine in me acknowledge the divine in you, I don't even know you, but I already know that there is something remarkable about you, and you deserve my respect and my support as you do your journey the way I'm doing my journey. And how do I say no that you don't get to have a journey because your journey is different than mine? I don't. And if I had that, I imagine that the Sunnis and the Shias and the Republicans and the Democrats might in fact find some more common ground than disparate ground.
I really love that, Jay. I want to just throw one thing in there that I just have heard probably 15 times in the last year, but the idea that there is no serious spiritual tradition that turns its back on the suffering of another. And that's what Marianne says. And to me, that defines what spirituality is, or what, you know, truth or tradition or whatever it is I say that I'm practicing. If I turn my back on the suffering of another, then in my mind, you know, I'm not living a bona fide spiritual path.
I love that. I haven't heard that, but I really like that. Yeah.
Jay and I, we were talking, what was it, Tuesday, and it was something very, very similar. I love the way you said it, Amy, but it was along the lines of, you know, if we, you know, those of that spiritual, you know, conscious mind coming from, you know, a divine state or a creative state where, you know, nothing matters except the collective, right? All of us as an organism. Then if someone else is hurting, then we're hurting. You know. Yes. So our work isn't, you know, we have work to do until that person isn't hurting anymore.
Yes. I love that, David.
So thank you for saying that, Amy. I like the way you put it.
Yeah, that was beautiful, and a great end cap to a conversation on greatness as well. I could certainly talk about this all day, especially with.
Did I end it? That's my fault. I put the end cap on it.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Shut us down, David.
That was a very nice end cap, all of you, really. Thank you very much for being a part of this today. It is an extraordinary moment in human history. I think we are at a beautiful spot and a precipice for some really positive, amazing change, and it's because of people like you who have the courage and the capacity to step up and speak your truths in a way that sheds light on the suffering of other people. And you're showing up to do that every day. You give me faith and you give me confidence that we're on the right path and we're going to track this down. And there is a real necessary movement here, and into that with greatness. So thank you very much, all of you. I really appreciate you coming on today. Amy, if you could tell us really quick how folks can reach you, we'll just go down the line quickly.
You can reach me through the website, www.recyclinghappiness. Also, feel free to leave any comments that you have on the Recycling Happiness Facebook page. Lovely.
Thank you, Amy. David?
Yeah, you can also reach me at the website, not Amy's, but mine, at kickassdad.org.
Beautiful. Thank you, David. Jay, how can our listeners find you?
They can find me at mostly at the website. There's it's www.thegreatnesszone.com. We also have a great Facebook page, so like us on there. We have daily inspirational things that go out to help remind people that greatness is a choice and you should choose it.
Hey, Jay, you know how people like you and I show our age? We say www in front of our website name.
Oh, what are we supposed to say?
Nothing. Just say the name. No. Like you don't say
I'm sorry. TheGreatnessZone.com. Great, I just dropped 20 years of my age. Thanks.
Yeah.
That was good.
You're going to save yourself a lot of oxygen.
Thank
That's like
you,
saying,
David.
yeah, man. You don't walk around introducing ourselves like my name is Mr. David Pagan. You just say I'm David Pagan.
Oh, all right. Well, I guess something else I have to change then too.
Oh, that's good. That's
Wonderful.
great.
Well, thank you so much to the Mr. J. Forte, the Mrs. Amy Alcini, the Mr. David Pagan. It was wonderful to have you. You can find me as well at kickassdad.org and here on The Spiritual Activist. Have a lovely day, folks.
Thanks, you guys.
Thanks,
Take
everybody.
care.